One new message from Kevin LR89 at gmail.com. Sub, a brief explanation. Body, Jeff. You are likely baffled and upset that you have just gotten experience, but all became clear. I hope they end by the end of this correspondence. First and foremost, I'd like to once again, after condolences of passing of your wife, this statement may provide the sound counter indicative after you have read the remainder of this letter, but I truly empathize and sympathize with you for your loss. That does not negate the other emotions I hold for you, at least. The jealousy, rage, pity, and despair I feel all swirl in a whirlwind of confusion, and even after so many months of analyzing and praying over the loss of our mutual friend. It's a good thing that some people still take the time to check the spam folders in their email accounts. Jeff Bonham always checked and usually found something interesting that he would have otherwise missed. Today it seems that the message from a mutual friend of his is his late wife Erin, a man named Kevin something. Truth be told, Kevin was much closer to Erin and than she had been to Jeff, and that was fine. But the two sometimes used to email each other interesting news stories, games, or video games. This particular message appeared that it had been sent several times in the past week or so. Jeff simply thought this message contained some especially funny video or amusing game, and Kevin wanted to make sure it got through. It was a bit strange to get a message from Kevin out of the blue like this. They haven't really spoken much since the funeral. Honestly, Jeff had always wondered if his wife was a bit of a crush on Kevin. Jeff would never worried about it too much. At 27 and 24 years old, when she died, he and Erin had been married for a few years, and if she had a little crush on the other guy, it didn't make him feel too jealous or threatened. The subject of the email: "Hey man, check this out." The vague enough that Jeff had no idea what was in it, only noting that it had several attachments. The email read the attachments contained a few cracked Steam games and bootlegged copies of the new Avengers movie that wasn't coming out for another week or so. The cracked games also include titles from Counter-Strike and Dead Island series, as well as two standalone ones, Goat Simulator and HunniePop. Not being much of a PC gamer, Jeff was only vaguely familiar with the Ghost Simulator and HunniePop, and thought of them as simply novelty games. But free is free, so he downloaded and installed the games. Goat Simulator was pretty self-explanatory, but he already knew that HunniePop was some sort of hot dating sim, or whatever it was. He knew it was something to do with some naked anime chicks, and it was enough to pique his curiosity. So after a quick glance into the life of the Adventures of Goat, he then started up the game with the naked chicks, intending to play for a bit before watching an unreleased Avengers sequel. Forbidden fruit, as they say. HunniePop started with the jaunty tune and the image of the harem's wharf busty, western-looking anime girls. Promising start, although he and Erin had checked a few of the hentai videos early in their marriage and on one drunken night. Well, truth be told, only Jeff had been drunk. Erin had mostly giggled and made fun of the insane plots and ludicrously proportioned women. Jeff played along too, embarrassed that he admit that the flick was actually pretty hot. This was the type of games he would have hidden from his wife, or was she still around, or tried to at least. Jeff played through the first tutorial round, and it became apparent that the main gameplay was to be based on a puzzle matching game along the lines of Candy Crush or Bejeweled. Aside from the columns and Dr. Mario and the obligatory Tetris binge in his childhood, Jeff had never really played that many title matching puzzlers, and didn't know whether he liked them or not. As he continued to play through the dates of HunniePop, it became apparent that he did in fact like this style of game, So much so that he intended to play for only an hour or so, until 10 at the latest, which he watched the pirated Avengers film. He wound up staying in the world of HunniePop just until past midnight, without realizing how much time had passed. From Kevin LR89 at gmail.com. Sub a brief explanation. Body count. I need to remind you that the relationship of the three of us had. I think you and I know more about the other than we have ever let on. Aaron was the common denominator of the equation. If a man doesn't have his pride, his sense of self-worth, if he lies in bed at night contemplating on the day and can't put a metal check mark into next to his each task he intended to fulfill the save for one, night after night, with that good quality of his left, when one realized it's not good enough despite one's intentions, was actually never been enough, what could have been the course of the action? The following day, Jeff barely kept his mind focused during his therapy session, or the court-ordered Alcoholics Anonymous meeting that came after. He was preoccupied with the thought of going back to his computer to ask and answer some more questions with his digital girlfriends. By the time it came and hold hands with the recite of the Lord's Prayer at the end of the AA meeting, he was ruminating over the drinks to buy for each eager, sex-deprived lady friends when he had met them at the bar. Their favorites were conveniently listed in the Honeybee, in the game mobile database of girls, but Jeff thought it'd be a good idea to mix things up further as well. Returning home that afternoon, the plan had been to watch Avengers: The Age of Ultron and then play some more HunniePop. About 30 minutes into the pirated movie, Jeff realized that he hadn't been paying attention and barely knew what was going on. He decided to finish the flick later, after a few dates, before starting the game up. He shot a quick message to Kevin, thanking him for the movie and games. The dating sim in particular, the response, no problem, would later go unread after the HunniePop session was done a few hours later. Jeff had formulated the strategy for playing the game. By this time he had done some Google research and learned that after a few successful dates with a certain girl, you could take her back to your room for a bonus round. At that point, it was the fact of bed for each available girls as the difficulty of rounds increased. His master plan was to play until every available girl was at the stage where one more good date around would result in, well, a sex round, and then go through each of the girls one by one in game and night at a time. He had decided to go after the Japanese girl Akio first, then try for the blue-haired gamer girl Nikki. From Kevin LR89 at gmail.com. Sub a brief explanation. Body count. It may seem odd to you that I have spoken about the pride of the man that was the late of the wife's paramour in the final year of life. I imagine this information comes from you as only a minor stock. I'd be surprised if you didn't at least suspect that Aaron was not only being entirely faithful to you, but I bet on some level you were certain a young married couples rarely last for these days. All things considered, you are fairly lucky as far as cuckolds go. I'm clean and secret, and at heart I'm a good guy. And despite the fact that we have never known each other very long, I think you're probably not too bad either. Otherwise, Erin would have left unnecessary to keep you in her life, but it would have just been guilt. I wonder at this point if you could put even the pieces together. I'm sure you remember the date. As far as the game is concerned, the name of the month doesn't matter, but it's on a Thursday. Thursday, not the 9th. Did that mean anything to you? For the past year, your wife and I have been what I would recall wonderful, abnormal relationship. It may have started out as a sex thing, but it evolved into so much more. The fact that she had known you for so long and had really only ever dated you in life is a blissful ignorance. I brought her to the state of blissful awareness, and she seemed to have a unfulfilled promises from a man who drinks and plays video games all day. Was a marriage was all about. I didn't want to steal your love away. You pushed her out and took her for granted, whatever she ended up leaving you or not. Wavering faith is uneventable. I could go on about your faults and my strengths, but it really doesn't matter, especially now. Nothing could bring your wife back. I know that you've suffered in this. How could you not? But that isn't enough. I am talking justice or revenge or anything dramatic. I am talking about evening up a bit. The night that she lost her life. The night that you were driving back in this deep shit party that ate BAC of 21. The night of the mutual regret that was all involved. Do you remember that I have volunteered sometimes? That my main job is driving ambulances and emergency response vehicles? You know I was one of the first responders on the scene. Not that many differences. Part of the game involves talking with each other's players' potential mates, asking them several questions to earn Hunnie in one of the game's forum's currency, another called Mooney. The questions the player may ask from range and contain: what's your favorite color? The keystone to every single relationship. What cup size are you rocking? Remembering the answers each girl gives to these questions helps the player earn more Hunnie. Players had also periodically asked questions by the girls, requiring them to recall the information given earlier in the conversation or just look up answers online, or wishing to hear his or her response to the hypothetical and personal question. Things like, what would you do if you find someone's wallet on the street, and how many girls are you seeing right now? Sometimes Jeff would find the questions to be fun, other times annoying, and sometimes just bizarre. From time to time, the game would seem to glitch on the certain questions to ask for answer. The words would display on the screen, but there was no voiceover. This typically happened on what Jeff felt were stranger questions. At one point, the game's Indian girl Belly asks, "Do you ever dream about it?" With no clarification. At another, cheerleader Tiffany posed as the query, "How much did you remember the next day?" These odds inquiries were not common, but still confusing and a bit off-putting. They seemed to pop up at random. Jeff was interested to see correctly if answering was some kind of subplot or alternative gameplay mode that only a few people knew of. He hadn't read anything about the other players encountering weird questions or glitches, but all he knew that there were some hidden characters and Easter eggs in the game, and it seemed that no one had figured this out yet, and he couldn't tell if he was playing with these segments correctly. He seemed to earn no Hunnie from any of these answers he gave questions to he posed. Eventually, he just began answering them randomly and moving on to the next. Not being very adept to the title matching puzzle games, sometimes it took a while for him to achieve a successful date. Then he preferred to ask to stick one girl at a time, attempting to win a date round with her before going to one with another date with other girls. He often found himself forgetting to use the power-ups that he had earned. This made for a slow go of things, but Jeff was glad to stretch out the gameplay just a bit longer. At certain points in the gameplay, the unknown girl would show up in his selection menu, usually in the evening or nighttime. Her picture was always grayed out, but she was not listed as being asleep. Jeff thought this must be one of the unlockable characters in the game, and that needed to do some kind of action or a certain time or place to get to where he would finally meet her. Whatever this girl would show up in the honeybee, he would attempt to meet her, whenever to give her some certain items to whichever the girl was with, to see if this would unlock the hidden character. This never worked, and after he went to visit another girl, or went on a date, the mystery woman would be gone again. In some of the early research Jeffrey did in the game, he had read something about the unlockable girls being a cat girl, and some being an alien woman. He stopped reading so he did not ruin the surprise of finding them, or discovering their secrets. The unknown icon didn't look like the whiskers of a cat or ears from what he could tell, so he decided that it must be extraterrestrial or some other girl that he had not read about. The more date rounds you win, the more hearts are displayed in each woman's profile. After a few days of playing, Jeff had gotten all the girls up to 3 hearts out of possible 5. Even though a girl has 4 hearts, It is possible to take her to bed after a date night. The plan was to keep going daytime dates until everyone has 5 hearts filled. Playing this manner made the experience last longer. In the meantime, Jeff Bonham had started an additional save file on the game, attempting to meet the girls on a different order to see if it results in changes of gameplay. There were no major differences of note, but also to be served extended as he spent playing in several files, and he continued to a few living of the uncharacteristic questions, some the same and some different. He came across the inquisition from Audrey, the mega bitch character that read the best part, and with no other choice, no in-laws at Christmas, the bed to myself, and no nagging about booze and dope. This quiz was struck rather Jeff odd, as sharply as they seemed to relate to bachelorhood, which recently had somewhat thrust upon him. But at least this question appeared to have some relation to the game, as Audrey's character openly uses illegal drugs, and as the answers mention them. Jeff chooses the third option, and the reply came up. At least you're honest, you son of a bitch. From Kevin LR89@gmail.com. A brief explanation. Body. I can't. By the time anyone had noticed the tire tracks leading to the woods, it was already after 9 a.m. You were hours into your blackout sleep, and she had been long since bled out, already starting to stiffen up. They think you wrapped around that maple tree around 3 or so, leaving plenty of time for your lovely wife to scream at you to wake up, grope fruitlessly for her cell phone, shout for help into the night, claw for the release of the seatbelt until her nails bent back and snapped away from the quick. I bet you were snoring. She said that you snored like a boar when you were drunk. You got to sleep and dream away at the wee hours of the morning, and barely had more concussion. Erin didn't get the luxury. She was awake and aware until the late stages of hypothalamic shock had started. Pinned at the passenger seat with the kinked spinal cord, she got to watch the sunrise while her severed but appendage femoral artery trickled down until it was cold and blue. And there was nothing else that got into the report that you've never heard about. She had enough room to make a room on her left arm a little, enough to reach things like still functional car lighter and a few other things center in the console. One of these things was one of your hidden joints. She told me the two of them at the 3 times that she tried smoking pot a few years ago. Turned out awful. They never got her pretty relaxed. I guess at one point she decided that you weren't going to wake up and there wasn't any help coming. So she lit up and took a few drags. We found the roach stuck into her shirt and the uncongealed stream of blood and vomit. I can only hope that it eased her last moments on the planet. At the same time, when Jeff began talking to his digital girlfriends on night dates and hopefully getting bonus sex rounds. As silly as it may sound to others, Jeff, knowing he had the night off to play the game, picked up a bottle of Chivas Regal Scotch for the occasion. Before the car accident, it was not uncommon for him to have a few drinks and play some video games, since the publicity of the wreck and the general knowledge of the community that he had been attending 12-step meetings. He tried to keep his drinking more hidden than ever. He had driven about 40 miles out of his way to a liquor store where he and his car wouldn't be recognized. The save file had loaded and started him out in the morning, and he set out to chat with some girls before taking the Asian girl Aiko on the date night. Twice when he felt it was different women before the day began. He was met with a question on the screen with no real text on it, just a series of eplees and the girls making their disappointed faces. He thought that he must have done something wrong in playing the game up to that point, but it didn't seem to be affecting the main flow of things. He hoped it didn't affect the dates. In-game evening turned into night, and he met up with Akio at the bar and lounge stage. He used the money which he accrued to buy his date a few drinks, starting off with some sake, her favorite, and later some wine. He dragged and dropped his static booze icons over the potential lover's face, prompting as such realistic replies. That was a chicken drink. Hit me hard with something stronger. Jeff poured himself a neat scotch and gulped down the smooth amber depressant. After a bit of smooching, Jeff asked the Japanese college professor out on the date. The puzzle round started at Vinny's restaurant and it went very well, and Jeff required a score using the win 17 of his 20 allotted moves, resulting in Eiko taking the offer to come over for the night for the private session. Jeff would not have refused that offer even if he'd been given the chance to. A few seconds after between the date and round and finding out the appearance of the text indicating the change of location to your bedroom, corrupted image upon on the screen before the bedroom bonus round started. It wasn't long enough to make a sense of it, but it appeared to be jumbled up in collage of game images. At long at last, it was time for Jeff Bonham to lose some digital virginity. The mechanics of the bonus round were slightly different from the normal dates in all ties. Match games had the amount of points, and the total score was constantly decreasing. This made quickly race against the clock feel like a mad dash match, many tiles quickly as one to achieve the required score. Jeff playing with the mouse was a bit pampered by having to click and drag the tiles where you wanted to place them. There was a touch screen that would have been optimal for speed. No matter, he was determined to max out the pleasure meter and win the bonus round. Jeff hadn't realized that he was scanning the title grid, trying to plan out 2 and 3 moves ahead. He had always begun to sweat and was biting his top lip with increasing ferocity. And when he crested halfway mark into the pleasure meter, he barely even noticed that the bra of his intimate, computerized lover was wearing disintegrated into a shiny, high-definition chest, were on full display. His title matching became more frantic as echoing moans increased in frequency. Before this could fill the pleasure meter and bring to climax oversexed professor, his monitor started flickering and glitching. Before he could register what was happening, the screen had gone black. From Kevin, LR89@gmail.com. A brief explanation. Body I can't. Not sure if you knew about this, but it also looked like she used a car lighter to try and ignite some papers and the owner's manual. We found a few burnt up napkins and the owner's booklet with singed corners a few feet from the wreck. I guess she was trying to start a fire and raise some smoke to signal anyone in the vacancy that it didn't work. She must have realized that starting a fire could have burned all 3 of you alive. You probably could have slept through it, but she was still awake at that point. Can you imagine the desperation, the loss of hope that would help make a person consider that? I try not to think about it too much. Blinking his dry eyes, Jeff unclenched his jaw and leaned back from the blank monitor as a formality. He poured another tall scotch into his tumbler and swallowed it in a single opening of his throat. Taking no time to enjoy the taste of the pricey booze, he hissed the burn out of his teeth and then assisted the situation before he was able to start clicking around the test to the computer. The game returned to the screen. The date appeared in the white text as usual, followed by an image that was familiar, so unique. What Jeff saw was a new girl, one he had never encountered or seen pictures of before. She was standing at the park at night looking downtrodden. She was built differently than any other girls in the game. She looked overweight, dumpy even, wearing jeans and a black t-shirt with Judas Priest logo. This detail was struck Jeff as a plain black Judas Priest shirt, pretty identical to the lower one on his wife owned. It was at this point when he glanced down at the lower left corner on the screen and saw the icon of the unknown girl he had been noticed grayed out while he began playing. She was now in color and had a name, Erin. The shock as the world as it got to the daily conversation, but it was most appropriate for Jeff's reaction, seeing a Japanese anime interpretation of his dead spouse, an adult puzzle and dating simulator. He couldn't find his breath for several seconds, and there was an icy sensation of pins and needles blooming steadily from the under of his sternum. He gasped at the unhappy-looking cartoon woman at the screen, noting her bright emerald eyes and the shade of contact lenses that Aaron sometimes wore, her deep violet hair, and the color that she had dyed it on New Year's Eve 3 years ago. The color she always said was half jokingly she wanted to have it dyed permanently. The physique that intentionally noted as being dumpy was in fact fairly accurate to a reflection of the way Erin had looked for the past few years of her life. Following the series of surgeries, she put on a bit of weight and was never able to lose much of it. He was gazing at it, all things considered, as accurate as representation of her could possibly expect. But why? After regaining some senses, Jeffrey had yet another drink, this time foregoing the glasses in flavor of sloppily kissing the glass rim of the bottle. The cold sensation from his insides abated a little, and he started looking at the rest of the game screen. He made a note that the normal game menus were listed, but not all were functional. Many of the buttons did nothing when they clicked. The heart meter was empty, and there were hunger and intoxication meters. He was going to be able to check Aaron's profile, and this blurred many doubts, and he could have hoped to see about the consignal or the like. All the information was on the screen. Her name, her married name. His name was there. Her late winter birthday job at the gift shop. Short stature, and even the late size of her bra was dead on. He couldn't scroll through the rest of the Honeybee and app game, but he had no need to. Everything he had seen was enough to send his head spinning. Again, he saw that none of the hearts were filled, and yet none of the only options seemed to be able to be clicked was ask on the date one, which stated it would be a night date instead of a first date. The only other thing he seemed to do is talk to her, even though it listed that no Huni points would be awarded for doing so. Against his better judgment, he clicked on the light blue button to engage in her HunniePop's version of the conversation. From Kevin LR89@gmail.com. Sub a brief explanation. Buddy, I can't. And yes, I did say all three of you. That was a typo. While you spent the past few months in haze and booze and plot, Aaron told me that you have become, as they say, comfortably numb. Everywhere. Maybe you can't find her sexy since she gained weight. Maybe you lost her libido. But she hadn't lost hers. You may have noticed, but she told me that she had been waking up night feeling sick, and that she was weeks late. I got no doubt who the father would have been. The plan was to tell you together. Two of you, us and I. It seemed obvious to me, but I guess you guys couldn't see the things that were through. Although she told me about the problems in bed, she also once mentioned you still have a fondness for more animated girls. I had a feeling that you would eventually get around playing HunniePop. I don't know the shit about programming, but my little brother does, and I'm a fair artist. I just wanted to tell you, to show you what I saw and experienced these past few months in a way that may actually make an impact on your brain, slowly pickling. In a way, you may have been right to know everything. Now you do. Maybe now I can get some closure as you're on your own. I imagine you have more questions, but honestly, I don't care now. I sympathize for your loss, and I also never want to see or hear from you again. I hope we can at least grant each other that. With sympathies, Kevin Randall. A message popped up in the Windows text that read, "How long has it been?" With the free choices of the answers in usual fashion. One was 6 months or so, the next almost a year, and finally over a year. Swiggling another few fingers worth of scotch, he clicked on the second option. Immediately another question appeared. Are things easier now? Jeff thought about his answer. His life was almost definitely a bigger mess than it had ever been in court orders, fines, and guilt. He chose the answering no, and the things only have gotten worse. This prompted a text reading, "I sincerely wish that the both of us had thought of it beforehand." Afterwards, the main set of options came back up, except the talk with her was no longer a clickable choice. The only other option was to go on a date. That was a part of him. A really large and glaring part that told Jeff just to stop and go to bed. Not even to think about what was happening until morning. But the slightly greater majority of his brain felt compelled to click the date button. Jeff was experiencing a strange combination of awe and despair. He hated thinking about his wife and of what happened to her, replaying everything he could remember right out of the accident, and a loop sometimes robbed him of sleep on days on end. There was also a sense now that it was now in. He was already ruminating about his current conundrum, and as well as experiencing the familiar undertow of the shame that he feared that would tear him apart again if he really sat through about it. If he didn't see this at least through its end, he would have yet seen another unfinished business throw at the ever-growing pile. The best he could do for his coincidence was to pay out a little longer before analyzing it. He clicked the date button. The images on the screen dissembled into a faded black as usual. The standard text faded in announcing the setting was changing back to the bedroom. It appeared that it would be no formal date round this time. The bedroom appeared in the gameplay grid and the girl came into view. Erin was standing on the screen looking sad or disappointed like she was in the previous screen, only this time in the fashion of the game. She was standing in her underwear, whereas some girls had sexy matching undergarments. She was instead just simply an unflattering resemblance of a black padded bra and dull blue panties. There was no sound bite from her as the standard bedroom rounds before the gameplay commences. She just stood there for a few seconds before the tiles dropped into the grid. The tiles themselves were not the standard mix of varied colors and shapes, but instead were limited to two varieties: the broken heart tiles, which drop in the player's score, and the new round, the red tile, that Jeff didn't recognize. There were only two types. It was inevitable that there could be several free tile matches without the player input. In fact, Jeff found out that if he tried click on the puzzle grid, nothing happened. The titles just kept matching, disappearing from being replaced on the top. Despite this, there was no score accumulating. The underscore of the title of the grid simply read static as 0 out of 0 the whole entire time. There was nothing that Jeff could do. He just watched the tiles match and drop, trying to figure out what the red tile tokens were. They were constantly in motion, so it was hard to get a good look. But they appeared to Jeff that they looked like smudged in crimson eyeballs or red-toned sonogram images. The more he studied them, the more they looked like him in the latter. Shifting his gaze right back to off the screen, he saw the half-naked girl, his wife, staring back at him, never blinking or speaking as the girls always do in puzzle rounds. After almost a minute of watching the tiles fall and match themselves, Erin's image began to change. It flicked a few times, and then it was replaced with a distorted version of herself. The new Erin remained static, her skin now pale and tainted blue. There were dark circles forming under her increasingly glazed over eyes, and a small blue bruise appeared on the corner of her mouth. The tiles continued to fall as a new pale woman just stared out of the monitor. Jeff stared, barely comprehending what he was about seeing. His hand had moved from the computer mouse and was simply covering his slightly open mouth. Almost before he could register what he was seeing, the image of his wife began to change again. The skin overtook a more pallid hue and became more molted, and bruises of spider webs and of veins. Splotches of purple and gray, sickly green covered her body. Dark streaks soon showed on across her forehead, and from the nose of the girl, inky clotted blood. Two deep gashes were visible, one on her leg and the other on her forearm, oozing bullets of gore. The sight almost more than Jeff could take. He hadn't been awake when the ambulance and the police had shown up at the scene of the car accident that had taken Erin's life, but he was aware that he had lain there dead for several hours when she passed out. The thought of something that tried to push her from his brain every day, but it was staring at him with glassy eyes. He closed his eyes tightly, and a tear ran down from these eyelids down to his nostril. When he opened the watery eyes again, the titles stopped, and dropping, and the sound cue for winning the date round played. The word success appeared on the grid as usual, but there was no closing dialogue. From this minimal research on the game, he knew that following the bedroom sound graphic and lewd picture of was meant on the screen. What Jeff saw on the screen faded to black inside the sink and brought to a wave of choking, dry sobs. The image of materialized was not anime-style drawing of a naked woman. Instead of a dark and corrupted picture of a woman lying face up in the patch of dead grass, dark streaks running from her nose and gash on her forehead, gray veins that could be creeping up her neck, and her eyes were darkly bruised. This must have been a paragraph from the scene from the car wreck. This was Erin before she was taken to morgue, and mere hours after her life had ceased. Jeff buried his face into his hands and coughed out the now moaning sobs. HunniePop closed itself and standard desktop returned. There was one notification from the email pop up in the tray. One new message from Kevin LR89@gmail.com. Sub, a brief explanation. Body, Jeff. You are likely baffled and upset by what you have just experienced, but all will become clear, I hope, by the end of this correspondence. And that, my pretties, was HunniePop, Newly Single, a creepypasta written by Urkel 666. My final thoughts on this story? Well, this was actually a really good story. Even though it's based on a hentai game, I still personally thought this was really neat and well made. It's a really great and awesome creepypasta. I mean, it's actually quite believable, and I can visualize this being the case because it's actually quite believable. Everything that's stated is actually very believable, to which I really do enjoy. That the fact that, this is basically, it has some, really good factors that really helped out. I do like the concept of the plot. I thought, the plot being, Jeff basically showing his experience of him playing the game. And some weird things really happen. And there's also pictures of evidence as to what's going on in the game. So that's actually pretty good. By the way, I got this from some Ordinary Gamers Wiki, so I'm going to leave a link in the description so you guys can go check out the story if you want. I do recommend this story. It's a really good one. I mean, I do remember hearing a couple narrations from it, especially from some Ordinary Gamers, and this story is actually quite good. But I really do have to say that this was actually a really interesting concept. I personally thought that, it's well made in detail. It's very described in detail as to what really happened. That's actually really something I can definitely say what I really do appreciate. I do appreciate that it was in the story, and actually it really helps out a lot more. So, with that being the case, and with that being said, I'm going to sit here and basically say right now that the concept of it was actually quite believable. I do know for a fact that there may be, I believe there was maybe one or two cliches in the story, but I'm willing to excuse that because it actually really helps out a lot more, and it definitely really helps out a lot more with, the concept and stuff. So I definitely really have to say right now that it's really good and well made in detail for a really good story. So I definitely have to say I personally enjoyed it. I thought it was really neat and well made. So with that being said, and that being the case, I'm just going to sit here and say right now that to the author of this story, I personally really enjoyed it. I thought it was really well made in detail, and yeah, I personally really enjoyed it. So with that being said, and that being the case, pardon me about that, I was just reading something, so yeah, with that being said, I personally really recommend this story. Yep, it's on Some Ordinary Gamers Wiki if you are interested. So, with that being said, and that being the case, I personally really thought it was enjoyable and stuff. So, there's definitely that. Yeah. And I want to give a shout out to the author, Urkelbot. Awesome job. You did a really good job with this story, and I personally really have to say right now that it's really neat and well made. So, with that being the case, and with that being said, yeah, like I'm always gonna say, this is just simply my own personal opinion, and if you disagree with it, that's perfectly fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions in regards to these stories. This is just simply my own personal thoughts. I give this story a 10 out of 10. Really detailed, really good and well made. I personally really like that. I thought it was really well made in detail and stuff like that. So, with that being said, and that being the case, what did you guys personally think of this pasta or story? Did you enjoy it? Did you not? Also, what you have done personally to help make this story a lot better, let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. I'm the Lion Queen. Thank you so much for watching today's video. And if you enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. Ring the bell for notifications when I upload, so that way you guys will not miss an upload. And as always, if you guys want to go check out my backup channel known as Ms. Dark Shigo, link to that will be in the About page section, so you guys can go follow me on there. Also, if you're interested in, following me well, yeah, like Twitter, you link to that will be in the About page section, so you guys can go follow me on there. Also, if you want to go follow me on DeviantArt, link to my DeviantArt will be in the About page section, so you guys can go follow me on there. And as always, that's pretty much all I have to really say, but if I'm missing something, please let me know what it is. And as always, with that being said and that being the case, yeah, please roll the outro because I'm out, and I'll see you all next time. What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel known as Ms. Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, please stay pretty.